All right. Good morning. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Saturday Morning Mastermind. I'm your host, Samantha Studebaker Carl, and I'm here with my good friends Dan Sissick and Catherine Clement. And this morning, we are going to talk about verse 2 of the Tao Te Ching, as talked about in the book Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Life by Dr. Wayne Dyer. And I would show you a picture of it, but I took the cover off. So anybody else have
I got it up.
There you go. There you go. Awesome. Awesome. And okay, so before we get this discussion going, jump over to SaturdayMorningMastermind.com. That'll bring you over to our live event page on our website, where you can scroll all the way down to the bottom and add a comment. And then the page will refresh and it'll pop up and we'll be able to see it, and then we can all kind of add to the discussion. And then just as kind of an FYI, if you're interested in participating in this discussion with us live here on the panel, shoot me a message on Facebook or over on Google+, one or the other. We're always up for having other people join the discussion, because it seems like, from week to week, sometimes we have a full panel, sometimes we don't. And of course, we want to hear your side of the discussion as well, and hear your thoughts and insights, because of course when we all talk about these topics, then we all learn and grow that much faster together. So, but before we get the conversation going, I want to give Dan and Catherine an opportunity to introduce themselves. So guys, go ahead and come out and do that. And for those of you who are watching, share a comment on the page. Again, it's SaturdayMorningMastermind.com is where you want to be. Go ahead.
Good morning. This is Catherine Clement in Boulder, Colorado, and excited to be back. I feel like I've been in a time warp with all of the holidays and changing of the books and the abundance reboot and all of that. So I'm just glad to be back. This is a great verse to talk about this morning, and I know some of our members are traveling still because of the holidays. Sandy's in New York City, I think, and I'm not sure where everyone else is, but just sending much love out to everybody this morning. Thanks for being here.
Hi, I'm Dan Sissick, and once again, I'm glad to be here. I enjoy being here and with the friends I've got here. Missing the rest of the panel and stuff. I agree. I think a lot of them are out traveling, as I've seen Facebook posts and stuff and things like that, or the holiday weather got to them and they're under the weather. So, but we'll get through this and look forward to hear what we can take away from this week's verse.
Okay. Sorry guys, I was on another page and wanted to be sure and get back to the right place here. And yeah, Catherine just messaged me and said that she had somebody that was interested in participating with us, so that'd be awesome. Add another person, more the merrier, right? And okay, so anyway, we're talking about, well, basically, this is chapter 2. Is it chapter 2? Hold on. Yeah, it's chapter 2 in the book Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Life by Dr. Wayne Dyer. And this chapter is called Living the Paradoxical Unity, and it's talking about verse 2 of the Tao Te Ching. And what I'm thinking here is that we can just go ahead and read maybe a section of this verse, maybe the first 2 little parts, and discuss that, and then we can go on to the other parts and discuss that. How's that sound, guys? Sound good? Okay. They're talking about the paradox of life and some of the opposites. So let's just start with this. In the first part, it says, "Under heaven all can see beauty as beauty only because there is ugliness. All can know good as good only because there is evil. Being and non-being produce each other. The difficult is born in the easy. Long is defined by the short, the high by the low. Before and after go along with each other." So let's kind of discuss that part. What thoughts that brings up, and I thought it was interesting that it just kind of calls out that whole the paradox of everything, and the fact that, you know, we define everything as something, right? You know, up is up and down and left and right, and there's opposites to everything, you know, whether there's beauty or ugliness or all of those things. But yet those things are just simply words. They don't really mean anything in the grand scheme of things. I mean, like in the whole universal everything is my thought on it. Like we talk about, let's just take up or down, for example. It's that up and down are only a matter of from one specific kind of perspective, you know, right here on our earth as defined in English, up and down, right? And yet, if you were to step out into space, up and down don't even exist. I mean, it's not even, I mean, you can't, there is no up, there is no down, it's just everywhere, right? And so when we start thinking about things like that, it, you know, it's kind of like that's the paradox, right? Is that, yeah, you can define things as one way or another, but yet at the same time, those definitions are only human meanings, and they don't necessarily mean anything in the universal meaning. I don't know. That's thoughts that came up for me. What do you guys think as far as that first part? What came up for you when you were reading it?
Well, I like, because I just kind of, I haven't fully read all of this, but I took a look at when he starts explaining and going over um, what's being said here. He says the concept of something or someone being beautiful is grounded in a belief system that promotes duality and judgment. And basically, I think what he's saying is that in order to be beautiful, you have to have something judged or deemed or identified as ugly, and vice versa. Same thing as with, you know, like you said, short or tall, up, down. You know, there's got to be something else is identified as the opposite, and it goes back to perspective. And funny how we all know what we mean when we say look up or look down, or she's beautiful or she's, you know, not so beautiful, or, you know, all that. And I think that's, you know, and we're taught that. I think when we're first brought into the world, we have the sense that everything is unique, new, beautiful, interesting, you know. And I go back to my beliefs in, you know, from the Bible and stuff like that. You know, God created everything beautiful, and, you know, in with that majesty and beauty in it, and that nothing was ugly until, you know, other things happened and we said it was ugly. So that's kind of, you know, some of what I just reading a little bit I've read and listened to, that's a little bit of what I got out of it.
You're so right about, I mean, we learn these things so at such an early age. You know, we from the time we're born, especially as children, adults around us are labeling things for us because they think we can't label them, so you know, they need to label them. But you know, when God made things, they weren't labeled. They didn't have little name tags on them. Everything that every text, every, yes, you know, there are texts, the Bible, and excuse me, different texts that are inspired by God. You know, they're written by God through humans, but still through humans. Let me cough just a second. Sorry about that. You know, so whoever wrote it still has this judgment. I mean, there are just very, very few people on the earth that are truly non-judgmental. I mean, there's a lot of people who are fairly compassionate and try to be non-judgmental, but to be truly non-judgmental in this 3D reality is difficult, you know, because like you said, Dan, from the very moment we're born, our parents and people around us and the schools especially, my goodness, I mean, they label everything as good and bad and acceptable or non-acceptable. And it really is just about perspective. I'm sure you guys, or maybe you have or haven't seen a really great clip from T.D. Jakes. He's an evangelist, and he talks about the difference between turtles and giraffes. And you could have a turtle and a giraffe standing side by side, look in the same direction, and have them give you their description of things, and you're going to get two completely different viewpoints, you know, even though they're standing at the exact same place and they're looking at the exact same direction. What the turtle describes to you is going to be way, way different from what the giraffe describes to you. And it's so true in every situation, how we can choose the perspective of how we want to see something, even though it can be very difficult in trying situations. And coming out of the holidays, this is a perfect time and a perfect example. I'm sure many people have been through times over the holidays. I certainly was, where I was put in the position to maybe change my perspective about things. You know, a lot of people deal with heavy emotions during the holidays, and I spoke to a lot of people, and this is such an incredible tool. And amazingly enough, there are people that don't realize that you can just change your perspective about something, or change the way you think about something, and it can completely change your emotion. We were talking a little bit right before the hangout, and about talking about dealing with emotions through the holidays, and it's human behavior is fascinating, you know, especially my own. When I look at how I act and react to things, I have to chuckle actually most of the time, because it's pretty hilarious, and it's absolutely amazing to me how powerful our minds are, and how we get so set on this one perspective on something, and sometimes to the point of just, you know, putting ourselves in tremendous grief or sorrow over something, and then realizing, you know, taking that step back and realizing, looking at it from a different perspective and realizing, wow, that doesn't hurt anymore. You know, and we've mentioned before about how, or I've mentioned before, one of my theories is, you know, that when we're really hurting, when our heart's really hurting like that, it's because we're lying to ourselves or somebody else, you know, telling an untruth. And that may not be an intentional lie or untruth, but it may just be a viewpoint that is not true. And most of the time, those viewpoints and beliefs are based on things that we've been told by other people or by the schools or whatnot as being good or bad. So we really do have tremendous control over our happiness or our sorrow or our anxiousness or our calmness or all of these other dualities just by our perspective.
I think that's a great point, Catherine, you know, about how we actually can kind of create our own frustrations in our lives based on these defined things, you know. I mean, like, well, and comparing yourself to one way or another, you know, just like we've been told in one respect that, you know, one thing is successful and something else is a failure, and you know, or maybe, I don't know, maybe your family has compared you to somebody else in the family, and when you compare yourself to that other person, you don't feel as successful because they've accomplished something you haven't accomplished. Or maybe you compared yourself to someone else out there in the world who is making a bunch of money and you're not making the same amount of money, and so these definitions that we've created for success and failure, rich versus poor, happy versus sad, you know, all of these things, it's like when you don't measure up to that definition, is that then that actually kind of you create in yourself a dissatisfaction or an unhappiness because you're not measuring up, right? But what if we didn't have these definitions of things? You know, let's just say, for instance, you know, I don't know, somebody who's like really active in their life, and they're busy, and say maybe you're sitting there thinking, you know, you aren't as busy of a person and you like to be at home and hang out and read books or whatever, and you're not like a super outgoing person, but yet if you're comparing yourself to this other person who's super outgoing and everything, and someone else might say that person is really successful, and you're just sitting at home, doing your thing, you may be sitting there thinking, oh, well, I'm just not as successful. I'm not as whatever because I don't do all these things, right? It's like you create your own unhappiness because you think there's something wrong with you, right? I was watching Big Bang Theory the other night, and who was it? It was a Crew through Parley. You know how I don't know if you guys ever watched that show, but Truth probably was having trouble finding a date, and he was all upset because everybody else had a girlfriend except for him. He didn't have a girlfriend. And so Penny hooks him up on a date, and he goes out with this girl, and he can't talk straight. He's mumbling over his words, and he's not saying things that make any sense, and he says things that are just completely out of context with what he ought to say, and completely makes a goof out of himself, right? and and so he gets out of this date, and whatever it was, I don't even remember what it was that he said last in the date, but it was something that was just like shocking, whatever it was. And so Penny comes to him, and she's like, what is wrong with you? And then he sees somebody else, and they're like, what is wrong with you? And then he gets home, and he's looking in the mirror, and he's going, what is wrong with you? And the whole thing is because he thinks he should behave a certain specific way, and that if he doesn't behave that way, there's something wrong with him, right? And so when we look at ourselves and say, okay, we haven't accomplished this thing, or we don't earn as much money as somebody else, or maybe we're not as active as somebody else, or we have this extra weight, or we eat too much stuff, or there's 10 million different things that we could sit here and say, I don't do this, or I do that, and other people don't do it. And when you compare yourself to everyone else and every other thing, and all these definitions of what you should be or shouldn't be or whatever, is that you actually can create these situations where you make yourself miserable trying to measure up to every other thing. But I don't know, what do you guys think? What if we took some of these definitions away and we just are how we are? How would that change your perspective on yourself?
Well, as you were talking about this, some things came up for me, and because I agree a lot with what you're saying, but at the same point, when we're living in a world that throws out these things at us and lives by these definitions and these things and places value on these things, how do you get around that then? Because, like, say, um, for me, like at work, I am, um, I have a yearly review, and I'm sit down time to time with my supervisors and stuff and things like that, my bosses, to go over progression and how I'm doing. And so and I've been feeling this a lot lately. I just feel like I don't measure up. I don't feel like I am doing anything right. I'm at the level, even though I'm fully capable and fully aware and knowing of what I'm capable, what I can do, and that I am good at what I do. That's to me, I think part of the rub with people, because you get those things that um, you have to come up against with other people and deal with. And in that sense, you know, it's what do you do, you know, and how do you keep it from affecting yourself? Like I said, I know it's partly in changing your perspective, but yet in work where I'm, you know, rated or qualified or whatever on the terms they place on where I'm supposed to be or what I'm supposed to be at, and it depends on my job, it does have an effect on me. It does put me in and it's easier said than done to just go in and say, oh, well, that's just their thought and it's all easy and I'm okay and I'm doing perfectly fine. When next thing tomorrow, because of something, they could say, well, goodbye, we don't want you anymore. You know, how does stuff like this play into that?
You want to jump out, Catherine, or? Jason, you kind of came in the middle of the conversation. How are you doing?
Hey everybody. Yeah, cleared all my caches and out of my computer and stuff, and so I was having a hard time getting back into Facebook and to get the link and everything. But great to be here. Sorry I missed the tail. I only got the tail end of that. Dan, you want to go ahead and expound on that a little bit more? Because um, I think I was understanding what you were saying about work and how what Wayne Dyer here is saying to kind of let go, and that where he's saying happiness is, we try to look for happiness where, and we try to find the way to happiness, but happiness is kind of the way, and how does that integrate into our daily lives? Is that what you were saying?
Well, I was kind of going at at it from, because like for a lot of people, I mean, yes, I'm building a business online and I take a lot of pleasure and stuff, but I have a lot of struggles and stresses with that too. But that's a different animal. But when I'm out in work and I'm judged and based on upon even upon duality here, like this, verse 2 talks about, where we have standards where you're not as good here because you're not reaching or you're not at a level we prescribed and said we expect, but yet I know I'm confident and good and understand I'm good at what I'm doing, and yes, I can learn and grow, but at the same point, how do you deal and manage some of that? Because so many, a lot of people do take stock in what other people say or how they perceive, or because we all want to look good to other people and like we're doing the best we can. And I know a lot of it is also perspective and how we take it and internalize it. But yet out there in the world where we're living in a world that quantifies and deals with everybody based on, well, you're not as good as here because you're not at the same level as somebody else, so you're not as good, basically, and that can play into people's minds and stuff and things like that. I will admit it, I'm going through some stresses and struggles kind of like that at work, where I know that if I change my perspective, I could say, okay, yeah, I'm okay with what they're thinking and stuff. But at the same point, you know, I also feel the stress and stuff that I need to step up and do more because I feel like they don't think I'm doing everything I can do, um, and that they expect. So, kind of in that realm. So, how do you balance this with that? It's kind of what I'm trying to get into.
I think that is the question too, is that, because that's what it's talking about here, is that embracing that duality of knowing that, okay, these definitions that the world has created are only definitions, and yet also embracing who you are and knowing what you do and um, how much effort that you put into things and valuing that for what it is, and trying not to worry so much about what other people think, but yet realizing that they do have these thoughts, and that it's like, yeah, I get your question there. I think I understand what you're asking, and that's a good question. Would
Well, to throw one out, but like said, like me for right now, in order to stay living in my home, stay living in pay my bills and stuff, I need this job. So I need to live up to those expectations, but yet they're, and yes, I'm putting some of the stress on myself, and I understand that. But yet, how do you get to the point where you can, ha- how do we better utilize this? To that's, I think, what I'm trying to get to. How do we help other people and ourselves, but show other people that what he's trying to get at, and how we can help ourselves get past those things, so that way we can still be effective and do what we're supposed to do at our jobs or in our lives or in our businesses or whatever we're um, striving for, but yet still have that peace. And I think that's the biggest issue I think a lot of people have. And I know at times I've had it. I've had that peace before, but at times I've lost how I got that peace. That type of thing.
Let me say this, Dan. I think one of the things he points out in here is and what and maybe refer to what you're talking about. I don't think we're expected by Dr. Wayne Dyer to shun the expectations of the outside world um, as we see them, but to accept them, but also to be open to other ways of achieving our expectations for ourselves, and to sort of like allow it to show us the way, and to just be of service, to focus on being of service for the sake of being of service, excuse me, and helping others, and helping the world, and helping your own situation, but not for like status. We're not trying to do it just for status, but to take a different approach to it. And I was kind of thinking of how, what sort of things act like that in the real world. And I kind of thought just a really simple example earlier of how if we're trying to fit a bolt into a nut, or a screw into its hole. You were trying to thread it in, and if we think we know the way it's supposed to go, but it keeps grabbing and it's not going in right. But if you change your mindset of trying to just put it in there, but then you actually let the threads guide you, and let it sort of guide itself, it sort of shows you the way. And so when I think he's talking about the happiness, showing us being our guide, and allowing to just go ahead and live in the happiness, and accept these, not have a preconceived perception of what other people are thinking about us guide our actions, but go ahead and guide our actions through our own. We already understand who we are and what we want, and how we are, and let that guide us, rather than the perceptions we think other people have about us, and act in just giving service, not expecting a pat on the back or a raise for every little thing we do. But also I've noticed, like what you're talking about, for me, I still need to go a little bit extra, and as far as for recognition, a lot of times we can go through. If we do that, we go through life and we don't get any recognition, or we don't get the perceived recognition that we'd like. And so I think there's that. We also need to be able to communicate what we're doing for the company, or for the business, or for the group, so that people have the opportunity to recognize, because they're also doing their own thing. So I get what you're saying. It's kind of hard to interweave this into our daily routines, but I think it's sort of a letting go and letting be, but then also putting our energies towards what we want, without letting the interference of other people's expectations get in the way, I guess.
Yeah, I agree with you, Jason. It is difficult to maintain this in your daily life. And Dan, when you're at work, yes, they have certain expectations of you, and you either have to, accommodate those, or you're going to lose your job and your apartment or whatever else. I think something that can be helpful is taking the emotion out of it. Is looking at, okay, this is your job. Every job has, or most jobs have, a job description. You have to, be able to do this, this, and this. So look at those as skills that you're learning, and that maybe you need to do better at. But there's a huge difference between, oh, I need to be a little bit better at this, and I'm not good enough. There's a huge difference there. If you can just take that emotion out of it and stop feeling like that little kid that's being whacked on the behind, because they didn't do something right. Sometimes we react from that that 3-year-old or that 4-year-old or 5-year-old, you know, when somebody at work says, oh, you know, you didn't do that well, then we're like, oh, I'm not good enough. You know, you have to like get the emotion out of there and look at it just as a set of skills that can be improved on. And also sometimes when you work outside of the home, I was a nurse, so if I messed up, somebody died. So you can imagine, you know, the amount of responsibility that goes with that. And sometimes we have to change, you know, our perspective on all of it. Um, most of us feel like we're divinely led by whoever we're divinely led by. We might have different beliefs about that, but you know, it's all for our greater good. So some of the things that we think of in our past as our biggest mistakes, or you know, places where we wish we'd done something different, everything plays out for our greater good, even if we don't understand it in the current situation or even looking back, you know. But when you're in the midst of it, you know, you just have to get through it, and then you can look back at it, and then maybe you can change your perspective and change your reactions to things. But as long as you're coming from that hurtful place of I'm not good enough, sometimes it's good to think about how our jobs or the situations that we're put in help us look at how we judge things. In other words, you know, look at your job and those expectations and the way they make you look at yourself, instead of looking at it as a punishment sort of thing. Look at how interesting that is, that if you just, you know, if you're in your yearly review and they bring up 1 or 2 things, or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6, you know, watch how easily you can turn against yourself. That's what I find really fascinating, is how easily we turn against ourselves and we start that negative self-talk of you're not good enough, you're a bad boy, whatever you want to call it, you know. You're not smart enough, you're not successful enough, you're not. How easily we turn on ourselves like that. You know, we look at other people or jobs or situations and try to blame it on them and say, oh, they make me feel this, excuse me, they make me feel that. They don't make you feel anything. You're the one that chooses how to feel about that situation. And maybe those situations are coming up to keep reminding you how easily you turn against yourself, because that's something that needs to be healed. That's what needs to be explored, you know, is why when somebody criticizes a little bit, why do we suddenly start self-flagellation or whatever you want to call it, you know. We are our worst enemies most of the time. We're the ones that call ourselves the worst names. We say things to ourselves that we wouldn't dare say to someone that we loved. And so when these situations come up, if we can remember that part of it, and instead of getting thrown into the emotions, step back and say, oh, this is only happening so I can see how easily I turn on myself and how much more loving I need to be with myself and others, because it also shows us where we judge too. We live in duality, you know, there's no doubt about that. That's the way this world is created. But in many of the great texts of the world, you know, it talks about living in the world but not being of the world or something. I don't know the exact thing, but you know what I'm saying. You know, you have to live in the world, but you don't have to be like the world. You know, yes, you have to follow this set of rules because that's been placed on us, but you don't have, if you break a rule or something, you don't have to hate yourself for it for the rest of your life, because you can recognize where that rule came from. It's just words of man. Everything that we live in here, every definition of everything is just words of man. And we all know how fickle words are, so I don't know if that helped at all, but I've rambled enough.
I think that's a good point, Catherine. Just that recognizing the definitions come from man, and that by just simply recognizing that and realizing that just because somebody says that you're not living up to this or you're not performing up to that doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you. It just means, like you were saying, it's just a skill that needs to be improved on. And when you take that whole, you know, you don't have to be hurt by that emotionally. You don't have to be injured by that because someone said something, because then you recognize that what they're saying is only words. It's not cutting you open. It's not physically hurting you. It's not physically, I mean, I don't know. I think that's kind of a good part of it right there, is just that realization of what you are supposedly supposed to be measuring up to is only a human standard. It's not a universal standard. And so when you can recognize that, then I think that can kind of really take that sting away. And sure, yeah, you've got to make these things happen in order to accomplish your job, or in order to perform to certain expectations. But if you don't, there's no reason to be mad at yourself or feel less than because of it, because you are just the same as everybody else out there. I mean, we're all the same. And just because I may do one thing and you may do something completely different does not mean that what you're doing is right and what I'm doing is wrong, or vice versa. It's just that it is just like, and here he talks about that. He talks about just be. And when he's talking about he says, for be at peace with what you observe, right? But then he goes on and he says, be a good animal and move freely, unencumbered with thoughts about where you should be and how you should be acting. For instance, imagine yourself as an otter, just living your otterness. You're not good, you're not bad, you're not beautiful or ugly, a hard worker or a slacker. You're simply an otter moving through the water or on land, freely, peacefully, playfully, and without judgments. And I think that's important. And it's not just about being an otter. I mean, it's about anything. It's about being Dan or Jason or Catherine or Samantha or Donna. I don't know where Donna, she jumped in, then she fell back off again. But whoever you are, is just be you. Don't worry about what the world is defining you as one way or another, and know that where you're coming from is your true self, right? And whatever efforts that you're putting forth are the efforts that are you, and that's fine. And that if you want to work harder, great. And if you don't want to work harder, then you don't want to work harder, and that doesn't make you good or bad or less or more or whatever. It just is. You just are. I don't know. What do you guys think?
Hmm. Hmm. Wow, there's just so much there. There's so much there that you guys just talked about, and I'm thinking in like the setting of an office, and having to deal with the office politics and all that stuff. And you sometimes bosses want to push you harder just to push you harder, even if they don't really have anything to really gripe about. They'll kind of make something up because they think that's what they got to do. um, so I think keeping things in perspective is huge. Knowing who these comments are coming from, knowing where these expectations are coming from. You know, um, Understanding your own abilities. I think, like you mentioned, Dan, we know we're capable of a higher standard, or of doing everything that needs to be done. But sometimes it's not perceived that way by others. I mean, um, and maybe we're just waiting for a chance to show it and to shine, and maybe we're also sitting back and letting other people not not do their, seeing other people not do their jobs, and not being able to do anything about it, but then pitching in to help cover them, and not getting any recognition for that. So, understanding what, when you're working for someone, that your boss's expectations are the most important. So going in, I guess, and talking to the boss and saying, hey, this is what we need to, what is it exactly I need to focus on more, or, to let them know, hey, I'm on the same page, and this is what I want for the company. I'm not looking for any extra credit or anything like that. I just want, these are the things I'm focused on to help better the company. What else is there for me that you want me to focus on specifically? And maybe here are these, here are these things that are happening, that I see happening, that I think could be done better, or things that are impeding on my work that need to be taken care of. Um, maybe a lot of it just comes down to communication, keeping that communication open with the people we need to, so that we can come in and have a little sidebar, and let them know where we stand and where we think things are, and find out where we stand in their eyes from their own mouths, rather than trying to just have a perception and just think we know what they're thinking, because that's kind of, that's probably not advisable to do. So, um, but yeah, I mean, real life situations, we want to find the best way to help the company, the best way to help ourselves, and not make it so difficult on ourselves, and be open to what life puts in front of us. Because maybe sometimes life is telling us, hey, this is the, here's another way to do it. You see what you want. The universe knows what we want. If we project it out there, it's going to give us a way, but it may not be the way that we're thinking of, and there might be a few twists and turns that we have to go through before we get there. If that makes any sense. What do you guys think?
Jason, you reminded me when you said that of, you guys have probably seen it. There's a cartoon that goes around on Facebook, and it's like, here's our plan, and here's God's plan. I don't know if you've seen that, but it seems to be true. Another thing, I'm sure you've heard the people will say, if you've got to talk in front of a large audience of people and you're afraid, just imagine them all in their underwear or something, and it kind of lightens up the situation. I think we're just so ingrained with this judgment and good and bad, that when somebody has the boss title, they're the boss, suddenly it's almost like, have you ever noticed, even as a grown adult with children and grandchildren, when you go home, you sort of walk in as that 5-year-old into your home again, and there's mom and dad, and there's good and bad, and on measuring up and not measuring up. It's the same thing. We give that status. We give that status. That's the point I want to make. We give that status to people because they have the boss title, and suddenly they are the end all and everything they say is right. Well, that's not true. It's not true at all. They are another 5-year-old standing there judging you because they're afraid that they're going to be judged by their boss. I mean, we're really just all a bunch of 5-year-olds running around. And if you can look at it from that perspective, and just look at that boss who's, and just see them as that 5-year-old just throwing their little temper tantrum, it just takes some of the sting out of it. It takes the emotion out of it. It helps us just get a little giggle in our head, instead of being, overwhelmed with feelings of inadequacy now. Because really only we can make ourselves feel inadequate. Nobody can make us feel inadequate. Only we do that. We give up our power when we do that. We're the ones that judge ourselves. Now, we might be judging ourselves because of what someone else said. It doesn't matter. There's no good and bad in God's eyes, I don't believe. I believe it's all good. Yes, there's bad, what we call bad things that happen, but they're experiences that happen for our growth, to show us where we need to not judge. I think, as much as man has said that God judges, I think God is absolutely non-judgmental. At least my experience with, I mean, I've had some really unique out-of-body experiences with spirits that there's no judgment. That's something that man sort of created. It's just more words from us. So just remembering that we're all just a bunch of 5-year-olds, it can really lighten things up a lot for you. And even the whole idea of, well, I have to perform and I have to get good reviews on my yearly thing, well, who says? Maybe you can go for the worst review of the year. I don't know. You can change your expectations about the situation and celebrate. I remember getting called to the school because my son, there was a Down syndrome child in his class. It used to be they put all the, quote, special children in a special class, and then through the years they decided, oh, that's not so good to judge those kids like that, so we're actually going to bring them out with the rest of the kids. Well, then this one kid was beating this Down syndrome kid in the stomach, and my son got up and like knocked this kid out, and the principal called me to school, and he was going to have my son arrested, and he was getting suspended and all of this. And I was just like, good job, let's go for pizza. I mean, the principal had a completely different viewpoint on the situation than I did. Now, who was right and who was wrong? Who's to say what's right and what's wrong, I'm sure the principal would say he was right, but in my eyes, I thought that my son was a hero, and we went for pizza. So I guess I've always had a gift of changing expectation. And Donna, I see you. I want to hear you right now before you disappear.
Yeah, good morning, guys. I apologize. I'm so sorry I'm late, but well, anyway, hey, I mean, it's not that I'm being nonchalant about it, but oh my God, I'm just glad I'm here with you and the energy. I was able to hear some of what you were saying. Yeah, I don't know. For some reason, I'm having some challenges here with my Google Hangout, but hopefully in 2016 it'll get a little bit better. It'll work out. But what you shared with me did work, Catherine. Thank you for that. And I don't mean to pop, yeah, yeah, don't mean to pop in here and just in the middle, but I am somewhat heard a bit about what you were saying there. Not all, but I did put something there in the discussion. I think Samantha had asked a question according to this verse that we're reading on the towel there. I guess that's how am I saying that correctly? The towel. But anyway, Happy New Year, everybody. With things, I've just learned, I think I've always heard it said, just let it go. Just go with the flow. And I never questioned, where did that come from? Where did that come from? Well, it actually comes from the water. Just let it go. Let it flow. And so I've always been accused of, Donna, you just so nonchalant, you act like you don't care. Well, there you go. That's kind of like the strength that I feel like that we just naturally are given, and this judgmental thing, like you were just saying there, throw that out and just let it go down the river or wherever. Just take your paddle boat with you, and you paddle so you don't get all left out there without something, and just be, just be yourself, and whatever you have in life, jobs and the circumstances around you. I mean, we could all sit here and say, woe is me and all that. We feel like the walls is caving in on us, but I have literally learned, and just from reading this verse, it's just so much confirmation everywhere you go, everywhere, online, offline. If you really seek to have that openness of just be, you'll be amazed at how things just start to just flow. Just I don't know. That's my take on what I heard, guys, and what I read, and I hope I responded to Samantha what she said there, and that discussion about, what would you do? Well, to me, what I got from that is, well, if I'm going down the road at intersection, all of a sudden I'm just snatched out just like that, well, I'm gone. That's it. So it's okay either way. It's okay. I hope that made sense. Oh my.
That's awesome, Donna. And that's a good point. Just be. What if what if we didn't worry about what everybody else thinks or their definitions or these standards that we're supposed to live up to? What if we just simply did what we knew that we were capable of doing and didn't worry about all those things? I mean, how would that change your situation at work or in life or in wherever you are at whatever given moment, if you didn't worry about anything that anybody else said? Now, I'm not saying just don't do anything, obviously, but if you have a job description and you're doing the best that you can to live up to it, and you're doing everything that you know that you're supposed to be doing, then do those other people's opinions really make a difference in the grand scheme of things? Because if you continue to go along the path that you're going and you're doing the best that you possibly can according to your own standards based on these rules or guidelines or whatever, then that person's opinion isn't really going to make a difference in your level of happiness, right? Because I don't know. I mean, I'm just sitting here thinking, because no matter what, they're going to decide whatever they're going to decide, and if for some reason you're doing your job and you don't mark this one thing on this one little sheet of paper and it's not exactly perfect, and they decide they're going to fire you over it, then, where's the real issue here? I mean, you're going to get fired no matter what. So you can either be sad for yourself because you didn't mark this thing on a piece of paper, or you can think to yourself, well, I did the best that I could possibly do, and I made a mistake. I'm not a bad person because of it. I just simply made a mistake. Or I did the best that I can because that's my effort. That's where I live, and this is where I'm going to be, and I'm going to be myself and do the best that I can do for me and not worry about what everybody else thinks. I don't know. That's kind of my thought on it, because whatever's going to happen is going to happen. And, just like, Donna was saying, is, just go with the flow, because if you're constantly sitting there trying to live up to everybody else's expectations and do what everybody else wants, then you're going to be miserable in yourself because you're not living up to what you want necessarily. And so what is our real definition of happiness and satisfaction in our lives? Is it living up to everybody else's expectations, or is it being happy with ourselves in our own lives, in our own moment, in our own whatever? What's your definition of happiness in life? That's my question. I don't know, I guess.
Well, that's a great point and valid point, Samantha. And the thing is, we do get to choose who we. It's not everyone we have to live up to their expectations. We get to choose whose expectations we want to live up to. Whose expectations are in alignment with our own expectations. There might be some. When we're in an employment situation, there's obviously, maybe the company, we might work for a company that's doing something that's, maybe it's going in a direction that, your life isn't necessarily going, but you perform a service that they need, so, I mean, to the extent that, you need to get the job done, then yeah, those expectations, but, we don't need to be, trying to live up to everybody's expectations. And that's where I think it's a good idea to figure out what those distractions are, what those what those distractions are that whether they're someone else's perception of us, or what we're thinking that they're thinking about us, or what the world expects of us, and notice those as just kind of distractions that are keeping us from focusing on what our real alignment is and what we really want for ourselves, what our own expectations are, kind of trim the fat, so to speak, and maybe we can see exactly what we can, what needs to be done in our that is in alignment with our specific direction that we want to go in life. We only have one shot at this. And like Donna said, if we're driving down the road one day and all of a sudden we're gone, it's that's just the way it is. So we we have really no choice to accept how things are, but we can change our own perception on it and decide whether or not that is important or not. Realize that one mistake doesn't make us a complete mistake in life. And but I also like to think that hey, if I've made a mistake and I see that as a pattern where I've made a similar mistake before, or haven't caught up with a deadline, or haven't um, performed a task, then maybe I can dig in. It might be a little bit difficult, but I might be able to dig down a little bit deeper and find out, what is it about my character traits that are allowing these things to happen. How can I maybe be more on schedule, or more, have more of a top of mind attitude about certain things so that I don't let them slip by. Or maybe there's more distractions in my life that I need to get rid of that are popping up at the wrong times and getting in, interfering with me having to provide that service, or perform that job. And that might be internally, either in our lives, in our daily lives, in our own environment at home, or it might be, they might also be distractions at work. There's a lot of things like that that go on. So, and if it's at work, then maybe those things are something that need to be communicated to our managers, and it needs to be done on a daily basis, I think, rather than just unloading everything at once with a manager and overloading them. But if you get in the habit of actually clearing the way, I think we might be able to see more progress in both our own efforts, and also in the way that we're being perceived by others at our workplace. Um, what do you guys think? I hate to ramble on, but this is just such a big, deep topic. Um, talk about this for days.
Well, I was gonna jump out again. And a lot of what you guys have been saying and stuff are what I've been working towards and things like that myself. And but I believe that, I'm not the only one going through this, so that was why I threw some of this out there, was because I'm sure there are other people that might see this or catch this, or it'll be of value to somebody else that might be struggling even in a worse or bigger case scenario than mine's small and minute, and a lot of it I put on myself, and I understand that. But I also wanted to, get out a little bit more about, how do we balance, you know, that duality, and that dealing with that expectations and still doing the job the way we're supposed to do, or living our lives the way we want to, but yet in harmony with everybody else too, out there, like with family stuff. I love the point Samantha and Catherine made about going back home or being around my family. I feel that all the time, that they're like my brother and me, like, those things. So learning and finessing that, I think it's something everybody deals with, and I think it's something that to some degree we deal with daily. And that's why I said, hopefully understanding more about how this book can lead us into understanding that better is what I was trying to open up a little bit more and bring and espouse out by our um, covering this today. And I think we really covered a lot of good things that will help a lot of people just in general. I know even some things that people said today kind of made me take a second look at some of the things and steps I've already taken, like opening lines of communication with my personal supervisor, and trying to sit with him more on a bi-weekly basis and say, okay, where are we, what things like that. So, you know, to alleviate some of my own personal stress that, yes, I'm putting on myself. So, I think this was a good chapter that I'm sure a lot of people, especially going into a new year, probably could use and take a lot of value from.
Yeah, I think if I'm understanding Dan, I think it was referring to his job there. What little bit I could hear there, and we all on the panel. I'm not sure what everybody. We all have some type of. Just want to interject one little last thing about what I heard you guys say when I popped on. What I've learned and take away is Dan kind of kicked on that a little bit there. The balance, okay. When you're out of balance, and it's kind of like I think when Samantha was working on my mind's just going back to the side of how she was working on the site and all of the turmoil and all this, but when you just stop and bring things into balance and kind of just go with it, you constantly have to take inventory. You don't, just like on one of the previous jobs I had many years ago, Don, my role sometimes was take inventory. And this just comes back to me again like a full circle in life with this book. There's nothing wrong with taking inventory of your life every day. That don't mean you stress out over it. Don't question so much as everything like why is this and why is that. Just come back in, just take inventory, slow it down, slow the chatter down, and just go with the flow. I don't know. I'm serious. I heard that all my life. Now I understand why I heard go with the flow. That's all. That's in my brain. That's in my brain. That's what I want to say. Take inventory. It's okay.
Well, this may be a strange thing to. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, it's fine. I was just going to mention we're at the top of the hour and just to have everybody go ahead and wrap up. So jump out there.
Well, this may be a strange thing to say since, we meet every week and we read these self-help books, but just, you're okay the way you are. You don't have to fix every little fault or what you're calling a fault because it's not even a fault, it's just something that someone has devised and put in your head and you're judging yourself about it. But just know that we are okay the way we are. It's okay to be different. I'm very blessed in that my whole life I didn't care if I followed what everybody said. Like I just always had my own way of looking at things, and I don't mind being different. It doesn't bother me to not agree with other people or whatever. So, but that's been such a blessing, and I see other people. And in certain situations myself, sometimes I see where we really beat ourselves up and make ourselves miserable and feel less than and not enough and all these things based on somebody else's beliefs. So the whole point of books like this is to get you to really take a look at your life and look at your beliefs, figure out where they came from, and make up your own mind about it. We learn all these things as children, but we need to revisit it as adults and maybe take a different perspective on it. But the biggest part is to love yourself, to be okay with who you are, whether your beliefs match other people's or not. Just be okay with who you are and love yourself and love other people, and try to just be, try to take that backward stance and just look at the big picture of things, like you started out talking about, Samantha, in the great scheme of things. If I were going to die tomorrow, does this really matter today? Sometimes you have to look at the worst case, as some people would consider that the worst case. Sometimes you have to look at the worst case scenario to kind of put things in perspective a little bit. Does this really, really matter? So I hope everybody has a great week. Thank you so much for coming. This is, we could talk about this for 3 hours, more than that. So have a great week. Thanks.
Anybody else have any final thoughts before we wrap up for today?
Nope, I'm good. Thanks for being here. Great to see you, Samantha. Great to hear from you, Donna. Thanks, Dan.
Let's read this last little section of this chapter where it says, do the Tao now. So this is kind of like the assignment for this chapter. And Wayne says, do the Tao today by noticing an opportunity to defend or explain yourself and choosing not to. Instead, turn within and sense the texture of misunderstanding. Feel it all the way through your physical system. Just be with what is, instead of opting to ease it by traversing the outer world path of explaining and defending. Don't get caught up in the apparent duality of being right or wrong. Congratulate yourself for making a choice to be in the paradoxical unity, a oneness where all the spectrum simply is. Silently appreciate the opportunity along with your willingness to practice your sageness. I think that's a great thing to remember, is just be and observe. Observe these things that we notice in the world. Observe the behaviors of other people and this propensity to define everything as one way or another, and realize that this is just simply words, is all it is. Just words that are, made up from nothing, and that we all have the opportunity to decide how we define everything, and we don't have to defend, and we don't have to feel judged, and we don't have to judge others, and we can simply be and live and be peaceful in ourselves and not worry about all that other crap. So anyway, that's my final thoughts for this afternoon, guys. Thank you so much for hanging out with us on the Saturday Morning Mastermind. Meet us here again next week, next Saturday at 10 a.m. Eastern. You can always find us at SaturdayMorningMastermind.com, or you can visit our website at MindsetMasteryCollective.com. Please like this video, share it with anybody that you think that it will be helpful to, and then we'll see you again next week. So have a great day and an awesome and amazing weekend. Bye for now.